this. Hi, friend. Today we're talking about feeling, specifically the harder feelings such as pain, sadness, rejection, regret, fear, loneliness, all of the things, the harder feelings, right? Because feelings are a very natural part of life and part of being human, but it's also a big motivator for why we do what we do. We're always trying to avoid pain and suffering. This comes up a lot in dating because dating just has a tendency to bring up all of the things, all of the vulnerability. It's such a risky process. It's such a risky thing to put ourselves out there. And I just want to start with a general question for you guys. Why do you think feelings are so hard? The harder feelings, right? Like pain, things like that. Why do you think this is something that we have a tendency to want to avoid or bypass or fix or dismiss? What do you guys think about?
This has come up for me a bit in coaching recently, so I've been thinking a lot about it. What I'm seeing with some clients is that they anticipate what this pain could be. And instead of having a direct, honest conversation with a partner or a potential partner, they avoid it, but then create these assumptions about the situation that could potentially be even more hurtful to themselves. I see this, let me hurt my own feelings so someone else can't do that to me. The pain they're inflicting on themselves, sometimes that could be even worse. And there's no authenticity to any of it. You don't know. It seems to be protection, but again, is it self-sabotage?
Yeah. Maybe can you give maybe an example that something our dating clients might be going through?
Yeah, even like rejection, right? I've seen this where it's like, "Oh, he just doesn't like me because I'm this." And I'm like, "Is that what he said?" No, but it's probably the worst thing they can think to hear from somebody else. So instead of potentially hearing it from somebody else, they say it to themselves first. But the likelihood of that even being what it is not likely. It's just a projection of our own fears that we're putting onto somebody else to avoid potentially hearing it from someone. Painful to hear it from somebody, but how painful is it to do it to yourself? And it may or may not be true.
So it sounds like these are the stories that we make up in
Mhm.
our heads when we're faced with doing something scary, such as being vulnerable about something, sharing about something, asking that other person, "How do you feel about me? I
Right.
actually really like you. What do you think?"
For me, that is strength. That is pure strength, but people look at it as weakness. I'm not doing that. What if they say this? I see a lot of win or lose. What if I lose? Or what if I cave? No, what if you're strong enough and you're brave enough to have these conversations and get the clear answer? That's the only way you're going to know.
That makes a lot of sense. I find that a lot too. Oftentimes when I'm coaching someone and they're fighting with themselves on whether or not to bring something up, it's a lot of this talk such as, "I just don't understand why I'm the one that always has to do it. Why am I the one? Like, why should I give that person the satisfaction?
Mhm.
Like,
Mhm.
me doing it?" And it's so interesting because when we hear this, we know that it's a protective mechanism.
Mhm.
They're protecting themselves from getting hurt, from getting rejected, from feeling that pain, right?
Yeah.
So what yeah, again, that pain being so hard to feel. Yeah, that totally makes sense. What do you guys think, Barb and Ariella?
Just going back to your original question, I love what Holly has to say. Yes, it's definitely protective mechanism. For me, my first thought is we are not conditioned as a society or within our family systems to confront our pain in any kind of a public way. I know of my own upbringing that feelings are always buried. When things would happen, you just wouldn't talk about them. So if anything were to happen growing up, you never really had opportunity to process anything that felt like pain. I grew up a very emotional child, teased for crying all the time. I was teased for getting angry about something. When something bad would happen, they would say, don't talk to her about it because she's going to cry. It was all about tucking it under the rug. I know there's many family systems that do that, but mine also has a cultural layer. So
Yes.
from a cultural Asian perspective, you just shake it off and you keep going, right? This family came here and gave up everything and you're crying about spilled milk. Come on. So there was this expectation. It's almost like first generation entitlement that you've got food at the table and a roof over your head. You should be grateful for everything. Stop worrying about your grades. Or make sure to worry about your grades because we need to further the family. I know that mine and many people's upbringings, and it doesn't have to be a first generation thing, but for the most part, socially, we're not in a position to address some things that go on. I'll give an example. I saw something on social media that said, it's no wonder that Gen X is full of a lot of empaths because we as Gen Xers witnessed the Space Shuttle Challenger explode in front of our eyes. The TV was rolled in, it exploded. The teacher just turned off the TV and rolled the TV back outside. There was no discussion. There was no, oh my gosh, what just happened? Everyone was completely freaked out by it. And the kids were just left there shell-shocked, like, wait, what just happened? This one thing that we're supposed to be heralded as this massive, major accomplishment became like this massive catastrophe. And I imagine kids growing up in 9/11, same thing. This massive catastrophe happens. Maybe there were some things in place at that point that allowed kids to express themselves. But years later, we're still trying to find ways to figure out how can we unpack our pain in a way that allows us not to hold on to it and come up with either a way of protection or a maladaptive behavior that ends up suppressing feelings of pain. And it's people like Brene Brown who in the last 5 to 7 years have finally said that vulnerability is a good thing to talk about. But it took her TED Talk and a pandemic for people to recognize, oh, I have this pain thing. One of the things that I know about pain, if you're experiencing trauma, I know I'm going a little off, but a little bit of context here. So trauma stays trauma if it's unprocessed. So we have the ability to process our pain almost immediately and start working towards healing if we process it relatively close to the inciting event. But think about my own experience. I've had different traumatic experiences, but it was only in my adult life when I knew that therapy was a tool that I was able to process that. But there's so many things in my childhood that probably happened that never got processed. My tendency was always to bury it and only talk about the things that weren't as deep. I didn't finish that PowerPoint presentation on time. Oh, that's so stressful. As opposed to my father has been sick for 3 years and he's completely incapacitated. I take care of him 3 days a week. We don't talk about those things, right? Whether our social system or our family systems growing up weren't supportive, then as an adult, we don't know where to find the support, right? We don't necessarily have a safe space to be able to process our pain. Most people are really uncomfortable holding you with your pain. Related to dating, when I was going through a big breakup, that line, don't worry, you'll get over him as soon as you get under somebody. I'm like, it's fine. Check it under the rug. Go out and start dating. My process was much different than that. I wasn't able to get under somebody that quickly and fix all my pain. I went the therapy route, the self-help book route, the group processing route. Again, as adults, we know this now, but we didn't start that way. That's the first thing coming out of my head, Loretta.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, you said so much there. And absolutely, it's definitely cultural, it's familial, it's societal. But at the same time, our parents were in a very different space as well, because my parents were first generation, came here for college from Hong Kong and Taiwan and trying to make a life for themselves. They had a lot of other more pressing things. Asian culture is all about saving face and not to show those harder feelings with the outside world, outside of the family. It's just so interesting because hearing you talk, Barb, it sounds like your family had put a negative spin on your tears, put a negative spin on your sadness versus what we know that feelings are just feelings. They're not good or bad. Even joy, it's just energy. That's all it is. It's objective. There's no bias, really. But if our parents didn't know how to even process their own pain or had a negative connotation to things like sadness and tears and crying and pain, then of course they're going to want to, "Mm-mm. Let's not do anything to make her cry. Let's not do anything to bring up those feelings, especially for those of us who are a little bit more sensitive and more emotional." So that totally makes a lot of sense. You said so much about processing trauma, processing pain, which is interesting because that also suggests that there's something we need to do with our pain in a way from a cognitive place versus feeling. Not that therapists don't also help us feel. That's what I was hearing from what you were saying. Processing trauma more from a logical place, trying to make sense of what just happened versus allowing what happened to be. I think sometimes we think that once we feel bad, we're going to get stuck in it forever.
The processing, whether it's with a therapist or a coach or self-guided courses, it's being able, and the process that needs to happen is to some degree simple things like I feel something as opposed to I am something, right? And so just making some of those little distinctions and having the language for it. And that's not the language that you grow up with. You're like, oh, you're dumb and you're stupid because it's your siblings. Or like, we bought you a Toys R Us. Whatever it is, it just gets, your feelings get diminished in the family system or even in a social group. So the tools, the methodology is more about that process to understand that feeling was something that happened that doesn't have to stay with you. And I think that's where coaching, that's where therapy processing can happen. And you don't have to stay with it. And once you recognize that, you can take steps forward for truly feeling the pain. A lot of people feel pain and they're like, nope, push it back down. Comes back up, nope, push it back down. And then it takes some big event for it to overwhelm them like a volcano erupting. And then they pull it back in, maybe get to a certain level. But if they don't come to realizations of what they need to do with it, then they push it back down and it blows up later. The reason we don't feel is because we're conditioned not to. And that conditioning requires work to uncondition or find a new way to feel your feelings.
Absolutely. Yes. And then even what you said earlier about what your friends would tell you after you've just gone through a divorce, like a huge thing for your friends to, "Hey, you're going to get over him when you get into some." Wow, that wasn't really, but that is also, that brings me to another thing too. And Ariel, maybe you can speak a little bit to this. When it comes to holding space for other people's pain, whether it's through friends or coaches or therapists, why do you think it's so hard to just be like, "Wow, you're going through a really hard thing, Barb. I'm really sorry that this happened. I'm going to be here for you. Whatever you need, I'm here. I can just listen. I don't even have to say anything. Unless you want me to, then you let me know." But why do you think it's so hard for people to just be present with someone's pain without having to give a little tip like that?
I'll answer both questions. Here's the deal. I think that, first of all, there's such a stigma attached to what we call even negative emotions or lower level frequencies or whatnot. And the whole point is that people are desperately trying to escape the meaning assigned to it, because when we're feeling those types of challenging emotions, we think something's wrong with us. We're assigning such a negative meaning to it and attaching it to us. So we're very quick to step in and say, let's solve this and get you out of this emotional state immediately. Right.
Yes.
So there's an aspect of this that we have to understand and acknowledge that we are having a human experience and we are on a journey in life. Our emotions is a very high level intelligence that we possess that helps to guide us along this path.
Yeah.
And whenever we are feeling an emotion, it is supplying us with information. Our duty in that is to check in with ourselves and saying, what is this telling? Is this telling me that there is a misalignment here? Is the misalignment in how I'm perceiving the situation? Or is the misalignment in the environment in which I've placed myself in, or the person I've invited into my life, the situation in which I've created, or the circumstance in which I find myself, right? And that's the work that we are to do whenever we're having an emotion. Oftentimes, when we're having very challenging emotions, it's leading us to feeling completely ungrounded. We feel like we are floating through the abyss without a tether. And that is terrifying. We need to understand how we perceive emotions. We are programmed to think that it's scary and we're programmed to think that it's bad. And so we have to reprogram ourselves to say, no, I am still here. I'm still me. I'm still in this life. I still have many decisions to make, many actions I can take to get back and to shift back into alignment. I am still in control here. I'm feeling something right now that is informing. And so it is perfectly safe for me to sit within this feeling. It is perfectly safe for me to acknowledge that I'm feeling this, and nothing out of control is going to occur from this feeling. And
Yes.
so sometimes we must remind ourselves of that.
Mm-hmm.
And also, it speaks to the law of polarity, the law of duality within work, okay, within this realm, this space, is that in order for us to feel elated and joy and happiness, we have to have the opposite of that as well. You can even think about it in the terms of within your mind, because from a spiritual sense, outside of the context of an institution of religion, when it comes down to just the spiritual sense of this, context of this, heaven and hell are not places that we go to. Heaven and hell exist within our mind, right here in the right now. That's
Mm-hmm.
right. And so at any given time, we are experiencing those poles and everything in between within our mental space. And so when we're in very challenging emotions, we feel like we're in a hellscape because it's void of faith, hope, love, joy, and all of the things that make us feel really good. But it needs to be respected and honored because its existence is the only reason we get to experience those higher level emotions or those good feeling emotions. So they're both informing each other. And wherever you see polarity, it's the same energy, just expressing different. And so why it's important to know that foundationally is because it removes a lot of that fear. Because what people don't want to happen is that they start feeling these feelings and then lose themselves. They feel these feelings and then they have a reaction to it that ends up creating even more problems for themselves, which is why we really need to be very mindful. I'm going to feel this. Everything's going to be okay. I don't need to push it away and I don't need to do anything about it in this moment. I just need to be present with it and feel it. I will come back to experiencing those higher level emotions because that's law. Everything must change. I will not always be here. I will not always be
Yeah.
doing this. It's literally impossible for that to happen.
I know my coach always says nothing is personal and nothing is permanent. And that is law. Yeah, you're absolutely right. You were talking about how our feelings have a way of informing us if we are to ask what the information is that's trying to come through. I do want to caveat that with the fact that there is timing is really important when asking that question. What is this trying to tell me? How is this trying to inform me? When we're stuck in pain, hurting, or dealing with sadness or anger, or all of these kind of denser energies, trying to intuitively come up with, how is this trying to teach me? How is this trying to inform me? Because we're having a narrowing of tunnel vision because of these hard emotions, it's hard to see the real answer. So just be careful with the timing of when we ask those questions, not to do any like spiritual kind of bypassing kind of thing. And yes, you're absolutely right, Ariel. We can't selectively numb. That's what Brene Brown said too, right? In order to feel the joy and the love, the gratitude, we also have to open ourselves to the other side of the spectrum as well. I wanted to talk a little bit about ways that we have a tendency to deal with our hard feelings sometimes. One is to go into blame, fighting, accusations, being critical, that kind of thing, anger. I've actually heard that anger is a secondary emotion to protect us from fear, sadness, and pain. So that's one way we bypass sometimes, by numbing or disassociating with substances, food, or shopping, or other distractions. Men, women, by doing, fixing. Oh, I got to put a plan in place to fix this because it doesn't feel good. I've actually heard Glennon Doyle Melton recently talk about how she has a tendency to turn her pain into art. So if she's going through a painful thing, her next thought is, ooh, how am I going to share this? How am I going to talk about this on my podcast? How am I going to help other people with it? She acknowledged that is a way that she kind of bypasses. And even as coaches, oftentimes when we're meeting a client and they're in a lot of pain or going through a hard time, we have a tendency to just want to ask, what do you think this is trying to teach? So, Holly, as I'm saying all of this, what do you think about that? Anyone that has any thoughts?
Yeah, for my own self, and I think I do this a lot with clients, the most painful things for me seem to be attached to an origin. So when I take it back and look and do this with my clients as well, when did you feel that pain? When do you remember feeling that pain in like such a way? And when we can trace the history of it and see where it began, I think we can give that love to, like Barb was saying earlier, we can't do it in the moment, but we can go back and we can remember those times and what made it so painful and give ourselves what we needed, or give our client what we needed, even if it's just to hold the space for them, let them cry, let them feel whatever that is. And self-awareness, understanding that this doesn't go away. It's something that we carry with us through life, and it's going to come up in different situations. The biggest triggers are typically attached to an origin wound. So for me, that's where I start. Like when the pain gets deep, okay, where is this? Where's the origin of this?
Yeah. And then when you do that with your clients or with yourself, what happened?
I feel like for myself and my clients, it's easier to acknowledge and validate the pain of the child more than the adult. It's easier to give to that child within us when we see that younger self than it is to hold that space for on our own. Because I think as adults, we're like, let's just get over it, or let's bypass it, or move on. But when we look back at the child who experienced it, never let it go, we're more able to hold that space and give that love that they needed in that moment.
Mm, yeah. And when you give that love to that younger parts of ourselves, how does that translate to the present moment?
I think it lessens the pain when you're able to articulate this with a partner or a friend or whatever. They're able to give you or acknowledge or give you what you needed in that moment as well.
Yeah. So potentially leading to bonding, deepening, showing up more authentically, vulnerable.
helping to heal.
Wow, I love anyone else.
Going off of what Holly said, if we are in a position where we don't always have somebody to support us, as you can experience pain 5 times in one day, and you may be working from home or maybe out traveling. When you go through this process, whether it's identifying your origin wound or just acknowledging the awareness of this pain that you've been suppressing, when you come up with a tool, what would you say to your 10-year-old self? Not only are
Yeah.
you helping others understand how to support you, but you're also cultivating a place of self support. So if you're in these moments where you're by yourself and you reach that level of awareness, wow, this really hurts, then you could also support yourself by these kinds of phrases. And they can be incredibly powerful and simple from a brain science perspective. You're just trying to interrupt that
Yeah.
pattern that defaults to negativity, that pattern that defaults to not having empathy for yourself or shutting everything down. So if
Mhm.
you have these little tools, little words, little post-it notes, then that helps cut the circuit so that you can then carve a new pathway that leads more in the place of healing, self-acceptance, self-compassion, as opposed to ridicule, fear, anger, resentment. They may feel like little things at the time, and you may be like, I can't see myself as a 10-year-old. You could get real cynical about it. But then once that idea is planted and you utilize the tool, you're like, wow, that actually is working. I've had people say that to me, and I've said it to my clients. What would you say to your 10-year-old self? What do you say to your own
Ah,
children when they're in this position?
yeah.
And then they realize that they automatically have the answer, but they just haven't used it on themselves.
Or even what would you say to a friend that's going through this? Like a friend that's the same age as you or older. We often need, as you were talking, Barb, I envision a motherly part of ourselves giving comfort to ourselves. It's okay. You're okay. I love you. Everything's going to be, it's
Yeah.
totally okay to feel these things, right?
Yeah. And whether we had that in our life or didn't have that in our lives, cultivating self empathy is really
Mhm.
important as we get older because there's just going to be so many more things happening in your life, right? Divorce, separation, loss of family member, major accidents, disability of some part of your body, right? And so
Yeah.
if you avoid all those feelings of pain at this stage in life, then you're only setting yourself up for more pain in the future, right? Ideally, you identify, okay, this is how I've been handling pain. I wonder if this other approach might work, right? Even
Yeah.
just curiosity around that, trying to say, let me try this thing. I've been
Yeah.
doing this all on my own all this time. Let me try a coach. Let me try therapy. Let me try a course. And
Yeah.
I've had clients who are like, I've tried everything, Barb, and that's why I'm coming to because I've tried everything. And now I really need help. It gets you closer to being able to live with more resilience in your life. Feeling our pain, feeling our feelings builds up our resilience so that we can then figure out, okay, how do we handle it the next time? And how do we handle it the next time?
What Arya was saying earlier, that it doesn't last, not going to be around forever. She was also saying that the reason we end up staying in it is because our thoughts get intermixed in there. So if you see children, I actually learned this from Dr. Shafali, who does conscious parenting. Children who have difficult emotion, who get mad and frustrated, all the things. It's really quick, the energy moves through, right? Because they don't have the negative self-talk. They don't have those mental constructs that we sometimes involve in our hard feelings that perpetuate it and make it worse. What do you think, Ariel, in thinking about some of your clients that are dating? Maybe it's a first date or second date, still the kind of very uncertain phases of dating and grappling with feelings of potentially rejection or feelings of just insecurity and lack of confidence when dating, how to move through that. What to How do we handle feelings like that when we're dating?
That's a great question. What I lead my clients through is learning how to surrender, making sure that we're not fighting feelings. We're
Mhm.
not going to war or going to battle with any of the feelings we are experiencing. And also that self talk of being mindful of the narrative that you're creating about that thing. If you are constantly worrying about that rejection, that's just informing you that there is some deeper work to be done and be thankful that you're in a position that's shining a light upon that. This is your opportunity to sit with that. This is your opportunity to process that out. And this is the thing is that in dating, we are constantly being triggered. This is where all of your strengths and weaknesses are laid to bear. The most vulnerable aspect of a person's life is through dating and relationship. This is going to be the highest trigger rate that we will experience will be while we are dating. And that's all it is really that opportunity and saying, oh, this is informing me. I'm receiving an opportunity to sit with this, to deal with this, and to really shift and say, I have a decision to make here. Is the story still in alignment with me? Do I want to change the story? And here's where sometimes I get some resistance from clients is that they are under the impression that there is a truth here and that they must be loyal to the truth.
Yeah.
And so their truth maybe they're always the odd one out. Maybe they're not enough.
Yeah.
And they're really loyal to it. They're married to it because they perceive it as a truth. The reality is that there are infinite amounts of truths that are going on in our experience at all times. Our job is not to suss all of that out and say what is the ultimate truth because that doesn't exist. What does exist is what is a truth that I can adopt that will lead me to the outcome I desire.
Mhm.
And if you can get real with yourself about that, is the truth that I've adopted leading me to a positive, feel good outcome? If your answer is no, then be willing to change it. Don't be
Yeah.
committed to your certain truth because there are a million other truths you could adopt at any point in time. And that is the accountability factor. It is your decision. You can always change whatever the truth
Mhm.
is. We've been programmed to think that is difficult. And if you believe it's difficult or that it's impossible, it will be, but it's not. So if
Mhm.
we can grant ourselves permission to say, there is another truth here
Yeah.
that actually feels better to and will lead me to a more positive outcome, let me switch these out. Let me not hold the belief that my programming is the end all be all and I'm stuck with this for the rest of my life
Yeah.
because it absolutely is not. And
Yeah.
every time I think that we have heard the stories of this happened to me, this programmed me in this way. And I've heard that these people over here who have overcome this, it took them 20 years of therapy to do this. And so people are going into this thinking, oh my gosh, my programming is here to stay. Look at these privileged people over here. It took them 20 years to get through that. And I'm over here, a single mother working two jobs. I think we need to acknowledge that the four of us here on speaking about this right now, we're all very privileged. We all have the time, the resources, and we have the knowledge to work through a lot of very heavy things. In my life currently, if I have an issue, I can sit here for hours on end and read about it and listen to 3-hour podcasts about it. Most of the people who are listening to us right now do not live the lives we live. And so we also have to acknowledge the reality of this, that there are people struggling with these things where they can't actually sit in sadness for weeks and weeks on end and ask themselves questions about it and things. They have a household to run and they don't have anyone to depend on. And they have to work through things at a quicker pace than maybe any four of us would have to sitting here right now. And so we also need to acknowledge that we're not all processing our feelings and experiencing things in the same way. And the manner in which we go about this cannot be the same for everyone, because the reality is that we all are coming from very different realities.
Yeah. So earlier you were talking about worrying thought with dating. Let's do some rapid fire. You also mentioned a truth, right? So I'm going to rapid fire some thoughts that our clients might have had. You guys feel free to come up with some too. Just limiting thoughts that sometimes we have. And then maybe we can all share a truth that we can adopt instead when we get stuck in those worrying thoughts. Does that make sense? What do you guys think about that? So one that I often hear is, I just know he's not going to like me.
The question is, do you like him? That's what you should be focused on. Do you like him?
Love that. Oh, I love that. Okay, great. Holly, you're up. No, but let's see. So I'm too old to be dating or to have anybody like
What makes you feel that way?
me. What makes you feel that way? My age.
Is there a certain age where you stop feeling like you want love?
When I'm in my grave. I'm not attractive or thin enough.
Where is that coming from?
I've been told that all my life.
And what do you truly believe? Is it true? Ask yourself, is it true?
People on the apps are just non-committal and not serious and only want sex.
Is that every single person on the apps? Like you've just spoken to every single person and that's what's happened every single time?
What'd you say, Holly?
Okay.
I said, are you on the apps? Is
Yeah.
that if you're saying this about people on the apps, you're on the apps?
Oh,
Is that you?
that's a good one. Yes, we're looking for exceptions sometimes.
Yeah. So basically, it's just putting a pause in the exaggerated thinking, right? Bring back down to reality. You haven't spoken to everyone on the app, so you don't know that everyone is like this or that. But you're on the apps, the chances are pretty good that someone like you is on the app as well.
Or you have to make that judgment about yourself if you're making that judgment about everyone on the app. And then what is the payout for holding on to that belief? As you're protecting yourself with that belief, what is it? Is it because you don't want to fail or you don't want to receive confirmation of this?
And that's how I would have answered Barb's question about body image and things like that. It's what outcome is coming from that belief. And what if it weren't true is a question I ask my clients. What if you're wrong about yourself? What if you're wrong and you've been making decisions and taking actions for this number of years as if what you just said is accurate and you're completely and utterly wrong about it? What if
Mm.
that's the truth?
Yeah. And even what is beauty?
Yeah. Where did you hear that the first time? Who told you that? So you go back to that original
Yes.
spot where you were told that you had a big nose or weren't attractive. Who told you that? And why did you decide to take that on as your belief? That's one person's thought, right? So why did you decide that their thought was important enough to take that on?
Yeah. Mhm. One I heard recently is after one of my friends got ghosted. Didn't work out. And it was very much like, why am I not lovable? Why am I not lovable? That is deeply rooted.
The question should be, am I lovable? Because when we word it that way, why am I not lovable? We've already made a decision to not be lovable. When we're feeling something is lacking, our question should be, am I this? Am I that? Because then your subconscious brain is going to kick in and look for evidence of being lovable. It will automatically come up with all the ways that you are lovable. So I would just reframe the question.
I love that. So in closing out, let's say one of our clients go on a date and maybe it went well, maybe it didn't. Do you guys have any tips after date, like post date, to take care of those feelings, such as rejection, when we're feeling insecure, unsure? Oh my gosh, does this person like me? Does this person not like me? I don't know how I did. I shouldn't have said this thing. Why did I say that? I shared about myself way too soon. I'm feeling really vulnerable and uncomfortable. Any What tips do you guys have?
Instead of going into the date looking for acceptance from others, go into the date with curiosity, because there's a million different outcomes and it's not just about whether someone's going to like you or not. So what am I going to learn about myself? What helped me feel connected or not connected on this date? It all becomes, what can I take away from this experience, rather than looking at it as a judgment of yourself.
I love that.
Yeah.
Not attached to outcome,
Mhm.
being present.
And I would say that journaling is a good tool for after the date. You've already had the experience, right? And you're left with all of these feelings and thoughts and opinions. I would say that journaling is a good tool. What I don't encourage my clients to do is to feel that and then go straight to their best friend and dump everything that happened in the date and get validated, or do something to bypass all the emotions they're having about the date, because all of that's bringing up important information. Some of those things are things that our clients need to work through and they need to be present with. It's not helpful to speak to someone who's just going to be agreeing with you on everything. So I say, when everything's raw and you still remember everything, dump it all out in your journal. And that way you can have that record of, oh, my date did this. It made me feel like this. I know after I'm finished feeling that feeling to go back and process why I felt that way. This is what was asked of me. I didn't want to answer the question, but I did. So I lacked a boundary in this situation. Now I'm going to sit with that. And when I'm ready, I'm going to process that out. How do I want to do that differently the next time? Right.
Mhm.
And so I think having that black and white record of when everything's very fresh in your mind, you can go back to that. And that way you can also take that journal to your therapist, to your coach, and say, this is what happened. I need help working through this now that I've sat with it for a while and I'm ready to get another opinion.
So the journaling is assessing what happened and what came up and what that experience was like before you forget, just to
Yeah.
have it down and process that way. Great. Barb, any thoughts?
Yeah, I would just say, I know what I would always say to my clients was self-care before and after the date. So prior to the date, a lot of times my clients would be really nervous about meeting somebody for the first time, especially those who've been in long relationships and it's like the first or second time they've gone on a date. So energetically, yoga class, a walk the dog, self-care going into the date. So your energy is light. And then post date, also self-care. Maybe you plan a bubble bath or take yourself on a date after whoever you went out with and do one of your favorite things. So I think the more that we cultivate an energy of lightness in ourselves, the more that we express that when we meet somebody for the first time and then carry that with us after. Maybe your self-care is calling a friend and just talking to them about like how amazing was you finally went on a first date after your big breakup. Bookending self-care on both sides of a date experience is really helpful and happens when you put yourself out on a date is a brave act. To put yourself out there in this place where you can be subject to scrutiny, review, projection, rejection is brave. Not everybody can do it. And so pat yourself on the back that you're able to get yourself out there and meet somebody and enjoy this idea of making a connection with another human. Let all the other stuff pass and be satisfied that you're brave enough to put yourself out there and get to know somebody for the first time. I didn't want to miss the fact that it takes an act of bravery to go into the dating world in general. That first time is going to be tough, but then less. And if we get back to this understanding of our feelings and working with our feelings, each time you do this thing of dating or meeting people or creating a new relationship, it won't feel as heavy as the last. It'll be more a growth experience, more a learning experience, and less this negative experience takes you down and just changes your energy altogether. So that lightness is very helpful when you have to take care of yourself to have lightness.
Yeah, I love that. And yeah, seconding what Holly said too, is being unattached to the outcome, coming home after the date or whatever, and just being like, you know what, whatever happened, the way it was supposed to happen. If he's my person, if she's my person, it'll work out. And if not, it's okay. There's someone else out there for me. It's
Yeah.
not do or die. Yes. Great. What do you guys think? Any last thoughts? Do you think I can stop sharing?
Yeah, you can stop.